Well, this morning we are blessed today in our pastor Neal's absent to have a very special guest. And Neal Franks is the president of the Missouri Baptist Foundation, and he is a former president of the Missouri Baptist Convention, and also had a very meaningful and long pastorate down at First Baptist Church of Branson. And so you're in for a real treat. I've heard Neal preach before, and so we are blessed to have him. Would you help us welcome Dr. Neal Franks?
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. Let me just tell you, you have a great worship leader and a great team of worshipers that are leading you here today. I don't know if you recognize that or not. You have a great tech team in the back that's getting the mix right and everything, and I'm just really glad to be here and glad to be at a place that you have a pastor named Neal. I like that. And so just kind of fill in. Now, Chris, did I understand that the pastor's wife's name is Kendra? Is that what I understand? No. Okay. What did he say? Somebody else was Kendra? Laura. Okay. All right. Because I thought he said, I wasn't paying attention. He's the worship guy. I wasn't even paying attention. But I thought, no, I was kidding about that. But my wife was named Kendra, and I thought he said his wife's name was Kendra. I was like, well, that would be really strange. And so I got to check on that. But hey, it is good to be with you. And I work for you, actually. I don't know if you know that or not. You've not probably met me, but I work for you because when you participate with the Missouri Baptist Convention, you send messengers to the annual meeting, and at the annual meeting they elect a president, and the president appoints a nominating committee, and the nominating committee appoints trustees, and trustees elect presidents. And that's what I am. So you're my boss, and so I hope you're pleased with everything that I do today because I want you to be happy with me. But I'm glad to be here. I do get to travel around the state now and speak in different churches and filling in, so I love doing that. And some of you may be wondering, what is the foundation? No, we do not help your basement not leak. That is not what we do. But the foundation does really two primary things. We do money management for ministries. And so we help churches, associations, ministries, and entities manage their money. And so that's whether it's a short-term cash account, whether it's a long-term endowment, whether it is church loans, strategy, financial strategy design. We help churches. So we're kind of in the financial business for churches. We also, though, on the other side of the fence, we do possibility planning for people. And what that means is that we help people be generous. You realize that your government frowns on certain ways for generosity and it smiles on other ways for generosity. And we try to help people figure out how to accomplish what they have been placed on their heart by God financially to help their church, help their ministries, help the association, help their entities. So we help people plan how they can best steward what God has given them. And so we do that all across the state, sit down with folks and help people be generous. And so I know what you're thinking already. You're thinking he's going to talk about money today. And you're right. I'm going to talk about money. But here's some good news. I don't want any of your money. I'm not interested in your money. But here's what I know about you. You're interested in your money, and I'm interested in my money. So if I talk about something that we're both interested in, maybe we'll learn something today. So we're going to talk about money, but we're talking about money related to being thankful. But I've already noticed something happen here. Everywhere I go, when I talk about money in church, I'll see a few guys reach their hand over and they put their hand on their wallet to make sure that I don't get any of their money. In the first service this morning, I saw a gentleman and he put his hands on his wife's purse while I started talking. And I asked him why it was that, and he said, well, that's where she keeps my money for me. And so maybe that's the situation that you're in today or not. But here's what I know about your church. Your church is a church that's focused on being thankful. And what I want to talk about is how sometimes our gratitude, our gratitudinal position, which is not really a word, by the way, but our gratitudinal position is influenced sometimes by whether we have, or the perception of whether we have or we have not. If you got your Bibles this morning, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 6. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21, passage that's very familiar to many of you, and focus this morning as we talk on Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. It has divided us for centuries now. It has divided friend from friend, neighbor from neighbor, co-worker from co-worker. In fact, it's also divided families. It's divided father from son, mother from daughter, brother from sister. No, I'm not talking about politics, though it has a tendency to divide us. Neither am I talking about your favorite sports team or whether or not Chevy is better than Ford. I'm talking about a more fundamental issue that we all face, that we all must make a decision. And once we make a decision on that, it separates us from another group of people. What is that? It's the age-old question. Is this cup half full or is it half empty? How many half-full people do we have in the room? Oh, look at you. How many half-empty people do we have in the room? Yeah, there were very few half-empty people in the first service. They didn't get up that early, if you believe in life like that. They were sleeping in, trying to get half the day over. But isn't it funny how fluid in a cup and our perception of that divides us? I'm kind of a half-empty kind of guy. That's just kind of the guy I am. Do you know any half-empty kind of people? I mean, my dad would say that I would complain if they hung me with a new rope. That's what my father said about me, right? I'd complain about that. And there are just some people that it just seems like everything goes against them and they're against everything and they're a little grumpy. In fact, I have a brother-in-law and he will oftentimes look at me and say, "Hey, Neal, you know half of all people are below average." And then he kind of looks at me and turns his head. I'm not sure what he's actually saying to me. And I was sharing that last night with my son, who's 16-year-old, his girlfriend, who was over at the house. I have a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old. A 20-year-old hasn't really dated a whole lot, so I'm not used to having a girl around the house. And I was kind of sharing a little bit about the sermon that I was going to preach. And I mentioned that, and she looked at me and said, "Well, Mr. Franks, but you also know that half of all people are above average." And I'm like, "Son, I think you found a really nice girl. I think you should keep her around," right? And my wife's like, "Yes, she needs to stay around more than what she is right now." Why? Because we have a tendency to perceive things based upon how we view them. And if you think the cup is half full, then you're focusing on the good part of it. And if you think the cup is half empty, you're thinking on the negative part of it. And our thankfulness is oftentimes driven by our perception of our circumstances. See, when you believe that what you have been given is enough, then it's easier for you to be thankful for what you have. But if your focus is always on what you do not have, it will be very difficult for you to be thankful. And here's what I want you to know. We are probably the most blessed people to ever live in human history. We have been given so much, where even those who are the most poor among us would be considered among the most wealthy around the world. And yet our thankfulness does not always overflow because we're concentrating on what we don't have. We don't have the new car when the neighbor has the new car. Or I don't have the account balance that I would like to have. And we concentrate on all these things that we don't have, which makes it more difficult for us to be thankful for what God has granted to us. Do you know that per capita Christians are giving less per capita today than they did during the Great Depression? That's not a financial problem. That's a spiritual problem. And what I want to point out to you today is what Jesus pointed out, and that it's this, that money lies to us. Money lies to us. I happen to have some money here with me today. It's a $100 bill. Now, some of you have never seen these before, and that's okay. Others of you have plenty of these. Some of these, you're actually making some at home, which is not probably a good idea. But on this picture, who is on the $100 bill? Benjamin Franklin. I was at another church, and I, for some reason, thought he was a president on that particular day, and I said the president, and nobody corrected me until the end of the second service. And so I know now that he is not a president. But this happy little guy on the $100 bill, next time you see one, either in person or on the screen someplace, next time you see one, I want you to know that that guy, even though he's half smiling at you, is a bald-faced liar. Now, he's got a little more hair than I do, and so I take that word very carefully because he's got hair around the side of him. But Benjamin Franklin is a bald-faced liar because money tells you that the more of it you have, the more valuable you are. But that is simply not true. It also tells you that its value is going to go up when that's not true. And then it also lies to you and tells you that this value of this is only valuable in this world. And that's not true either. And so what I want to do today is to point out the lies that maybe you have believed in order that you might make a better investment with your time. But ultimately, I'm not here to talk about money. I'm not interested in your money. I'm interested in your heart. Matthew chapter 6, verse 19, Jesus himself speaking says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth," where we have a little mood music too with this passage. That's good. You are hearing that music, is that correct? Okay, good. All right, just making sure you're hearing that. Is that normal when you have music with scripture reading? Okay, I just want to know. Every church is a little bit different. I just want to know. Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Notice Jesus said, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth." A couple of things I want you to notice. First thing I want you to notice, that word for lay up is the same Greek base word as the word treasure. So it could be translated, "Do not treasure for yourselves treasure." Now, notice what a treasure is then. What does it mean to treasure something? Well, to treasure something means to value it more than what it's actually worth. To treasure something is to value something maybe that's more than what it's actually worth. How many of you are garage sailors? You weren't in the Navy, but you were in the garage sailors. I despise garage sales. In fact, when my wife wants to do one, I have to leave for the weekend because I struggle with placing items that I thought of great value out on a table for a quarter and people to walk by and evaluate my decision-making process on what I purchased. And then they will go by and say, "Well, that's not worth a quarter. I'll give you a dime for it." And I'm like, "Well, I paid $50 for that, and you want to, I'm just a quarter. I feel like I'm giving it away because I have overvalued." If you've ever owned a house and it comes time to sell it, and you have an idea of what that house is worth, and then you talk to a realtor, and they start talking really to you, you begin to understand that you've overvalued something, right? Or guys, we've got our favorite t-shirt, don't we? We got that favorite t-shirt. We got it at whatever it was, and it's got 14 holes in it, but we think it's the greatest thing in the world, and our wife goes, "That's not worth anything. That's not even worth collecting the dust." There are things that we value that exceed the actual true value because we overvalue. We treasure them, right? They are treasures to us, and they are trash oftentimes to everyone around us. Well, notice Jesus says, "Do not treasure for yourselves treasures." And that sounds like something you'd expect Jesus to say, right? That we're not supposed to have any treasures. But is that what Jesus actually says? Does Jesus tell us to have no money, to be poor, to be impoverished? No, he's just telling us that we shouldn't treasure things where? On the earth. He doesn't say we're not supposed to have treasures. He just says be really careful when you treasure your treasure here on earth because it is at risk. You know, oftentimes I talk to churches, and churches think that the safest thing they can do with their reserve cash is to keep it in cash because they think that cash doesn't lose value. But do you know what? Cash loses value every year. In fact, our government is working very diligently for you to lose 2% of the value of your dollar every single year. They've not been successful this past year, and historically it's been 3%. But you and I know how this works, right? Let me ask this question. How many of you remember when gasoline was less than $1 a gallon? Anybody remember? Oh, wow. All right, young people, look at the maturity in this room, all right? Gas is what, about $2.27, $2.30, something like that, $2.10, $2.11, somewhere in that range. Some of you remember when gasoline was less than 50 cents. Anybody less than 50 centers in here? Oh, my goodness. Wow. The knowledge here in this room. How many of you remember gasoline being less than a quarter? Oh, wow. my goodness. I've been in some churches, and the lowest that I have found was 11 cents. And maybe you can beat 11 cents here. I don't know. But I even had one guy in one church go, well, I can't remember how much gasoline was, but I know how much a bale of hay was. Because he went way beyond gasoline during his time, right? But today, the cost of gasoline is not a quarter. It's not 50 cents. It's 2 something. Why is that? Has the size of a gallon changed? Well, not supposedly. I mean, we pay somebody with our tax dollar to go around and measure the gas pumps, right? That's a great job, isn't it, to measure the gas pump, make sure it's getting a gallon? But what's changed? It's not the size of the gallon, but it's the value of the dollar that you have. Because there's this thing called inflation, where your value of your dollar is lowered every year, which impacts your retirement and impacts your savings for college, and it impacts the ability of the church to do ministry next year and in 5 years and in 10 years. See, investing in this world is risky. Not only is there that risk, but notice the risk that Jesus himself points out. He says, do not treasure for yourself treasures on earth, because, he doesn't mention inflation, but he knew about inflation. He would concur, I would assume. But he warns you about moths. Have you ever had a moth in your closet? Ever had one of those things? Now, Grandma never had that because she had the moth balls, right? And you could smell that everywhere you would go. She didn't have that problem. But have you ever noticed that if you ever have a moth, how smart those moths really are? Because those moths know what garment is your favorite garment. And that is the one they begin to eat on. Isn't that true, right? Or maybe it's not your favorite, but it's the most expensive garment in there. Jesus says, be careful to treasure things that are garments, because the things that you treasure, there's a risk to that. There's a moth that can come along and eat that and destroy that. And if that's where your treasure is, that's where your focus is, that's where your heart is, you may be running a risk you don't even realize. Now, I don't have any moths in my closet. I have a different kind of problem in my closet. My closet shrinks all the clothes I put in it. That's my problem in my closet. I don't know if you have that same problem or not. Jesus doesn't mention that, but I'm sure he would have if he had more time. But then he goes on to say, it's not just that is at risk, not just moths, but rust destroys. I had 2 boys. A lot of the tools that I had growing up ended up where? Out in the yard. And what happens to things that get scratched or get scraped that are metal? They will rust over time. Even the car that you love so much, it is at risk. The truck is at risk because rust may destroy that. And then notice, he also warns us that our treasures here on this earth, they are liable for thieves to break in and steal. I would imagine that most of you locked your cars this morning when you came in. Did you not? Most of us probably do. But some of you remember a day when you didn't lock your car doors. You didn't lock the doors of your house. You even had a shotgun in the back of the truck when you went to school, right? The world is just a different place, and today we're afraid of someone stealing what we have. So we have security systems, alarm systems. We have insurance in case somebody falls down at our house, that they will not sue us for our stuff, but sue the insurance company. Jesus says all of our treasure, if it's here on earth, is at terrible, terrible risk. And so he tells us that maybe there's a better investment. That there's a better investment because our value is not tied into what we have. In this world, though, the world tries to convince us to place our investments here in this world. And far too many of us as Christians have fallen for that lie, believing that the more that we have, the more valuable we are. Money tells us the more that we have of it, the more valuable that we are. And so all of these things are bombarding us, and then the world confirms it. I have a family member who's done pretty well in life, and they will invite me and my wife occasionally to go on a cruise. Ever been on a cruise? Cruise is a nice thing. In fact, what's nice about the cruises they invite us on is they pay for us to go on the cruise, and that makes it a great cruise, right? And then they put us on this cruise line called Crystal Cruise. Anybody heard of Crystal Cruise? Yeah, you haven't heard of Crystal Cruise because they don't let people like you and me on the boat on Crystal Cruise. But the greatest thing of all that my family member does for me is when we go on this cruise, he will fly us business class. Now, if you're not familiar with business class, those are seats on the airplane that actually fit human beings. I don't know if you've known that or not. But there's a whole section of the plane that normal-sized human beings can sit there. And they treat you like you are somebody. I'll get on the flight and they'll say, Mr. Franks, we're so glad that you're here today. And I'll go, well, of course you are. And they'll hand me my privatized menu. And then they'll pull that little curtain, that little lovely curtain, that they pull that curtain so all the normal people don't get to see the great people like I am. In fact, they take us on one flight we took was a 19-hour flight, 19 hours in the air. And in business class, that goes just like that. Because in business class, your seat goes all the way flat in business class. They bring a little mattress cover for my seat so that I'm comfy in business class. On this particular flight in business class, they brought me pajamas to change into for I'd be comfy on the flight. Now, I grew up in L.A., Lower Arkansas, okay? And we don't wear our pajamas in front of anybody unless we're going to Walmart. And I'm like, I'm not going to put my pajamas in front of all these other people in business class, but when everybody else is wearing pajamas in business class, you put on your pajamas just like everybody else. And so you're sitting there thinking you're somebody in business class wearing pajamas. Isn't that wrong? Isn't that strange? But for some reason, when people treat us differently based on how much money we've spent, or how much money that we have, or the car that we drive, or the house that we live in, and people begin to treat us differently, and we begin to think we're different because we have more, or we've spent more on this particular item. Took my family last spring. We went to one of those amusement parks in Florida, and it's like one of those take like $14,000 to get in, and so you get in and you stand in line, and lo and behold, as you're standing in line for hours, there's another line of people that just keep going and passing you. Well, why is that? Well, they're in the fast pass lane because they paid another $14,000 to be there. And then people who don't have any money, we say, well, go stand over in that line. And don't you think if you get told to go stand in the line over a while that you begin to think less of yourself when you don't have to do those things? And so money lies to us and begins to tell us all these things that we think are true, and Jesus goes, oh, wait a minute, no. That's not true. That's not where your value is. Your value is not what you have or what you don't have. The value is that you were created in the image of God. That's where your value is. That's why we care for the little children. That's why we care for the senior saint in the nursing home. Not because the money that they have or the production they can produce. It's because they bear the image of God, and our value is in that, not in what we have or what we don't have. Because it can be taken away. Some of you have been around long enough that you've invested money in the stock market, and one day you felt really good about yourself, and then the crash happens, and you don't feel very good about yourself after that, right? And here's my stock market tip. You want a stock market tip? The market will go up, it will go down. I just can't tell you when. Just can't tell you when. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. Can't tell you when. And if you think that your purpose and your value is based on what you have or what you don't have, you're never going to be thankful. Because you're going to be worried and concentrating on things that you don't have. So here's what Jesus says. Hey, listen, you got to have stuff. Jesus doesn't say don't have stuff, don't invest, don't plan for retirement, don't have enough for today. Doesn't say those things. He just says you better not treasure them because they're at risk. Well, if they're at risk, then what should we treasure? Well, Jesus goes on to tell us. Verse 20. He says, instead, treasure for yourself treasures in heaven. We'll come back. But to treasure your treasures in heaven. Why? They're not at risk. There are no moths in heaven. Amen? I'm going to step out on a ledge here and go, there's no mosquitoes either. I don't know if I have any Bible verse for that. I'm just hoping. I'm believing in faith, right? There's no rust in heaven, and there's surely no thieves anymore. Yeah, there were some thieves who used to be thieves like us, but we get in not based on what we did or didn't do, but it's based upon what Christ did for us. So how then do we invest in heaven? Well, it's not you send some money to the television preacher. That's not how you get money into heaven. How do you treasure and invest in heaven? Well, think about it. What is the only thing that's going to heaven? Now, I know there was a cartoon movie, All Dogs Go to Heaven. Not going to debate that theologically today. But what is the only thing that's going to make it heaven? It's going to be people. It's people. So how do we invest in heaven? We invest in those ministries, those things that will lead people to heaven, that will lead people to repentance and faith. That's why you send missionaries to a foreign country. That's why you send students for a weekend. You're investing in things, people that are going to make it to heaven. And so we should have our focus, at least partially, our true treasures based on those things that are going to make it into heaven. It's going to be people, not stuff. Because you know this, right? You know you can't take it with you. They do not accept the U.S. dollar in heaven. They don't. Peter's not going to change money with you. And by the way, they don't take the dollar in the other eternal destination either, in case that's your backup plan. Not a good backup plan. So what we have has been given for us to take care of ourselves, take care of those that are around us, to be generous, but also to do things to advance the gospel. Why is that? Because where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. I have the coolest job now to talk about money in church. And now, it's a good thing that I travel from place to place, because you probably wouldn't want to hear that every Sunday. But somebody's got to tell you the importance of money and what money can do, not just in this world, but in the world to come. Part of my job occasionally is to pass out money. Not doing that today, but I pass out money occasionally. And I was at a meeting about 2 years ago. It was my first couple of weeks in the job, and I'm at a university, and I'm passing out scholarship money. And so I'm sitting there with Lexa. Lexa's a first-generation student, first time anybody in her family ever to go to college, African-American student. And so I'm handing her the check, smiling right there, trying to make sure the glare is not too bad on the camera. And I say, "Congratulations, Lexa, on receiving the Mary Gibbs Scholarship." And it just kind of dawned on me at that moment, I have no idea who Mary Gibbs is. I hope she's okay with me giving her money away, because that's what I'm doing right now. And so after the event, I went back to the office and I looked it up and went to the computer, and sure enough, come to find out, when Mary Gibbs passed away, she left some money, because she didn't need it anymore, she left some money to send students to college. That's pretty cool, you know. Do you know that you can do that? You don't have to give everything that you have, but you can leave something. Because here's what's going to happen. If you've faithfully given to this church financially, one day you're going to be promoted to heaven, and you're going to stop giving to this church. And your church has come to depend upon your giving. And so Mary Gibbs decided that after she was gone, she was going to leave something. That's a pretty cool story, and you can do that. You can leave an asset, you can leave a vehicle, you can leave one account, you can give 10%. You could even invest your money over time. Some of you have IRAs, right? You have an IRA, you know what that is? Does anybody have an IAC? You know what that is? An IAC? An IAC is an irresponsible adult child. That's what an IAC is. And occasionally I run into some people who are like, you know what, we shouldn't leave all of our money to our children immediately, because that would not be very good for them. And so we're able to take that money and invest it over time and give the kids everything they would have gotten, but over time, and double their money to advance the gospel, to give to the ministries that they believed in. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, let me tell you about Mary Gibbs. What was amazing about Mary Gibbs is that Mary Gibbs died in 1921. So 100 years later, she's still sending kids to a Christian college. Last week, actually, I gave away my third Mary Gibbs Scholarship. And you know, Mary Gibbs Scholarship this year was bigger than it was last year. And it was bigger than the first one that I gave. Mary Gibbs financially has done more from heaven than she ever did from earth, because she needed her stuff like you and I need our stuff. But once we're gone, there's an opportunity to give. But I hope you don't think I'm talking about money, because I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about your heart, because Jesus said, verse 21, where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be. So can I just ask you, where's your heart? Some of us have more month than we do money at the end, don't we? And you're not able to give anything. We understand that. That's fine. We're not asking for money. But some of you have done pretty well, and you've got extra resources, and you don't know how to give those away in the most valuable way. We can help you with that. But all of us, when it's all said and done, will have something that we can leave. But I'm not talking about money today. I'm talking about your heart. Are you thankful for what God has given you? Are you thankful for what you have and not frustrated by what you don't have? My father is 84 years old, 83 years old, turning 84 soon. And I've talked to him before, and he has said, son, I never thought I would have as much as I have today. Growing up as a child, we were just dirt poor. Couldn't even afford the dirt, right? You had to go to your neighbors to get the dirt. And now you look back and you go, look how blessed I am. If I would have ever thought. It really doesn't matter how much you have or what you don't have. It really doesn't matter. It's about your heart. What's your heart condition today? Because Jesus said, where your heart is, there too will be your treasure. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes this morning? I'm not here to make anybody feel guilty. I hope you don't feel guilty or feel like I've been on your toes today. I'm not. I want to invite you to this great opportunity that we have been given to participate in what God is doing, because it reveals to us where our heart is. Maybe you don't have a will. I know it's strange to talk about a will in church, but if you don't have a will, you really need one, because the state will decide what happens to your stuff. Maybe you don't have a power of attorney. You need one of those. Maybe you don't have a trust. Maybe you don't have medical directives. These are items that you really need to have to protect your family. And the Missouri Baptist Foundation is here to help you get what you need based on what you want done. But again, today I'm not talking about money. I'm not talking about stuff. I'm talking about your heart. Where's your heart? Are you over-treasuring the things of this world rather than treasuring the things of the world to come, the world that we will spend all of eternity in? Well, maybe today is a day to start your thankfulness for what God has done for you. Father, we're thankful.